What's up, guys? Welcome to Franchise Revolution. My name is Jason Revere. I'm the founder of Revolution Franchise Brokers, and we're a firm that helps our clients and we guide them through the process of buying a franchise, often for the very first time. And when you're buying a franchise for the very first time, or you're starting your own business, even if it's not a franchise business, there is a lot of fear that you have to overcome to go through with it, to actually, launch the business and get it up and running and make that decision to do so. And one of those fears that you've got to overcome is that fear of failure. And I can tell you right now that fear never goes away. That fear will always be there. No matter how successful you are, there will always be that nagging, fear of failure in the background. And that stops a lot of people. It stops actually the majority of people from actually moving forward and opening up their very first franchise. And are there strategies and are there principles that you can adopt to help maybe not eliminate that fear of failure, but to mitigate the possibility of failure if you decide to do so? And that way it can help you to make that logical decision that, hey, I can see that I have done everything I can to mitigate that failure. And yes, the answer is yes. And we're here today to talk to you about the 5 strategies that we advise all of our clients to adopt when starting their very first franchise. So let's get started. All right, so strategy number 1, look for franchises that have a low employee count. Why is that? Well, let's just think about it. Picture a McDonald's. Right? When they sign their franchise agreement, they're signing up to have about 110 employees ready to go on day 1 before they open. If you're a first-time business owner, can you imagine managing, leading, being holding people accountable, over 100 people accountable? That's just a lot of stress for anybody, let alone a very first-time business owner. And even when you've had managerial experience in your previous life, when you were an employee working for another company, even if you were in the leadership role and you had a lot of people that reported to you, there is something definitely, definitively different about you writing the checks to pay these people. Okay. And that is a scary proposition. You don't want to stack fear of failure on top of fear of conflict on top of that. Right. And so when you have all these people that are working for you, it can take your eye off the prize. And instead of focusing on growing your business, you're focusing on putting out fires. You're focusing on the relational aspect of having all these people work for you. They come from different backgrounds. They come from different with different skill sets and different motivations, and that's just a lot to swallow. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It's just one of those things. It's one of these principles that will help to mitigate the possibility of failure. So look for those franchises that have a very low employee count, and you'll be off to a good start with your very first business. All right, strategy number 2, look for franchises that have low overhead. Okay, in business, and especially early on in business, cash flow is king. But you don't want to have more flowing out than flowing in for a very long time, right? Sure, that's going to be what it's like at the very beginning. But if you own a business that has a huge overhead, that is a stressful thing when, again, you've never done this before. Now you've got that added burden of the financial side of things. When you're watching more money go out the door than come in, that is scary right there. That is fear manifesting itself. And that is something that can be avoided if you look for the right franchises that have low overhead. And what are those, right? So juxtapose these 2 different concepts. You've got one concept here that requires you to have a leased space in a high traffic area. Maybe it's 7,000 square feet. That's going to be $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a month of lease, of rent to pay on that space. And that's just to get the doors open. That's not talking about the equipment that you got to put in, the people that we mentioned in the last strategy that you got to put into that business. That is a ton of overhead, electricity, HVAC, the whole 9 yards, right? Inventory. These are huge overhead expenses. Juxtapose that with a home-based service business that has maybe 2 to 3 employees to to run, but can be run out of your own home or maybe even out of like a Class C type real estate where it's one of those buildings got a small overhead door and a little bit of a of an area for a couple desks and a couple phones, etc. That is going to be maybe $1,000 a month, $1,500 a month, comparatively to the 20 plus $1,000 a month. It doesn't matter how much money you have. When you're watching more money go out than come in at the early stages of your business, that gives people fear, and fear makes people hesitate, and hesitation makes your worst fears come true, right? Thanks, Bodhi from Point Break. That is what happens when you own a business that is so overhead heavy that it robbing you of your own creativity. And so we advise you when you're looking at your first business, take a look at the overhead. Just do some quick calculations, build a pro forma. And if it's so much money that it makes your palms sweat, it might be a good idea to take another look and look at some other franchises with lower overhead that can allow you to grow again into this uh, being a business owner, right? Grow into the lifestyle of being a business owner and writing those checks every single month when they're only two, three, and four digits instead of five digits, right? And that's where it starts to get really scary once you start getting into those adding digits to your monthly expenditures. So keep your overhead low on your very first franchise. All right, strategy number three, and this is a twofer because this is a huge one. Look for franchises that have high average ticket with a high gross profit margin. Okay. And what is gross profit margin? That is all the money that's left over after subtracting the cost of goods sold or the cost of services sold. Why is that important? Okay. Think about it like this. You're looking at a franchise. Again, let's use the donut franchise as an example. It's like $4 a sale, right? You have to have so many sales just to get to the point where you're hitting that $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 per month just income. Well, we didn't even take into consideration the cost of goods sold. What if it's a 60%, 70% cost of goods sold, leaving with 40 or 30% gross profit margins to cover your overhead? That's where that money comes from. That's where the dollars come from to pay for your rent, to pay for your people, right? That is very challenging. You got to have a ton of it. And that's why the runway on these businesses is so long. And we'll get to that in a later one here, the runway. But that's really important. Again, juxtapose that with a business. Let's call it maybe like a painting franchise, right? In the home services space, painting is a really popular concept, and they've got average tickets of like $5,000 to $6,000. So every time you make a sale, it's $5,000 to $6,000, but your cost of goods sold is so much smaller by comparison as a percentage to the job itself, comparatively to the donuts. That now you're talking. Let's say you have a 30% cost of goods sold, or even a 40 or a 50% cost of goods sold. That leaves you a 50% margin on a $10,000 or a $5,000 sale. It's $2,500 to cover your overhead on every single deal that you sell. That's a lot different, right? So these are very different businesses and they require different skill sets. And there's a lot that goes into this, but just black and white on paper, that would look like a much simpler business that can allow you to operate with less sales, which equals less stress, but more money to cover your overhead to allow you to grow into a fully formed business owner. And that's why we tend to uh, uh, recommend that our clients look at franchises like that have got low employee counts. They've got a high gross profit margin and low overhead. All of these things work together to make it a much simpler business for them to operate. And when business slows down, because you're going to have those ebbs and those flows in business no matter what, when you've got a high average ticket and a high gross profit margin, you've got a lot more money left over to pay for your overhead expenses, even if times get a little bit tight during different seasons of the year. So that one is that's that. Our principle number four is look for franchises that can ramp up quickly, right? Preferably to becoming cash flow positive within 3 months. Okay, why is that important? Well, just think about it like this. Everyone needs a win early on in business. And it's really hard to feel like you're winning when every single month more money is going out than is coming in. Okay, so that'd be cash flow negative. Cash flow positive is when you finally break even. You now have more money coming in than going out. And that's a win, right? That is where you're like, "Oh my gosh, my business is its own little entity now. It's its own little baby, and it can leave, it can fly out of the nest now on its own because it is self-sufficient." That is a win. And so if you can get that win early on in business, that dramatically increases the potential that you will continue in that business and that you will not fail. And right, and I coach my clients all the time that are afraid of failure. You only fail when you give up. Well, it's a lot easier to not give up when you get to cash flow positivity earlier on in the process, right? There are a lot of franchises out there it's going to take 18 months to become cash flow positive. That's a tough pill to swallow when you're getting into business ownership for the very first time and you're not used to losing money all the time because you put yourself in this great position. You were saving money to be able to buy a franchise, and now you've got to retrain your brain to think I'm investing in my future self. And you do that for 18 months, 2 years sometimes. That can be really challenging, and it's a lot more comforting to just give up and go back to working for a job that you know that that's not going to happen. You're not going to be losing more money than you're uh, earning. And so when you can get a business, you can get a franchise that can get you to that level, that break even point, cash flow positivity, whatever you want to call it, earlier on, preferably in that 3 month window, that's going to give you a huge boost of motivation to keep you moving, to keep you accelerating through all of your issues, which will come up there. You're going to have issues. It is what it is. It's business. It's a lot simpler when you're cash flow positive to make those hard decisions, to want to invest more into your business, to grow it even further above and beyond just that break even point, to the point where it's giving you that financial and lifestyle that goals that you were looking for when you originally started this thing. So keep that in mind. Look for businesses that can get you to be cash flow positive within that first 3 months. And that brings us to number 5, the very last one on our list here. Last but not least, number 5 here is look for franchises that have great mentorship programs, right? And I don't mean that the franchisor is exclusively taking on that responsibility of being that mentor, because they need to, right? They need to provide coaching and support and be an advisor to you on growing this business. But let's just be honest, most of the time, a franchisor is going to have people that are employees of the franchise that are working at the franchise, getting a W-2 paycheck, advising you on what it's going to be like to operate a business. They don't know what you're going through, right? They don't know the struggles that you're going through with it in month 1, month 2, month 3, day 1, day 2, day 3, right? They're not going to know exactly what you're going through. They're going to have an idea because they've gone through this before. They've gone through all of the training. They're very good at what they do. I'm not saying that it's not valuable, but it's not the only thing that they need to be able to provide for you. And that's why I really advocate early on, new franchise owners, very first time business owners, get involved with a franchise that has a standardized mentorship, peer-to-peer mentorship program within that, right? Where you can actually talk to other franchise owners that are likely in close proximity to you, right? They know a lot of the stuff that you're going to be going through because they've been there before, right? They've been in business for 1, 2, 3 years, and they can really empathize with you. And they can give you advice that is like tangible advice. Like, here is exactly what I did when I faced that issue. Here's the advertising that I chose to do. Here's other places that I would find my best employees, right? My best team members. All of the issues that you're going through, they're going to be able to coach you through and guide you through. And then when you get to the end of your first year, second year in business, and now you're you've got that scar tissue, you've got that experience. Now you can then step into that mentorship role with any new franchise owner that comes in, and the cycle continues. The cool thing is they actually usually pay those mentors. Most franchises do. Check with your franchisor though. Not sure, this is not a guarantee by any stretch, but I do know a lot of franchises that will pay their mentors to do that, to work with their little proteges. So look for those franchises because it can really make a big difference to you when you're struggling and you're in, week 6, and you're just, you're beaten down, you're not exactly confident, it's just like everything. Anytime you start anything new, guess what? You're not going to be very good at it. I don't care how good you were in your previous life, your previous job. When you start this new business, you're not going to be any good at it. It just is what it is. And so, how do we get there? Mentorship can get you there. A sounding board, somebody to bounce ideas off of, because your ideas are probably going to stink. I kid, of course, but that's the truth of it's the truth of the matter. When you start in your own business, you don't know what you're going through, you don't know what you're doing, and so having that strong mentorship program, looking for those franchises that can do that, that's again another key point that we talk about with all of our clients. Okay, so to wrap this up, the 5 key strategies for all first-time franchise buyers is: number 1, look for franchises that have a low employee count. Number 2, look for franchises that are low overhead. Number 3, look for franchises that have high average ticket and a high gross profit margin. Number 4, look for the franchises that can get you to cash flow positivity within roughly 3 months. And number 5, look for the franchises that provide a strong mentorship program, not only just from the franchisor level, but peer-to-peer franchisee level. So if you focus on all of these 5 strategies, you're really putting yourself in the best possible position to succeed in franchise ownership with your first franchise. And if you want help identifying which of these franchises, which franchise can really help you to check off each one of these boxes, if you're a brand new, if you're brand new to the franchising space and looking into getting into it for the very first time, you want to check off all those boxes, reach out to us, hit up our website, revfran.com, for a free and no obligation consultation with one of our franchise advisors. And we'll be happy to walk you through that process for you at, again, absolutely no charge to you. How does that happen? You're going to have to reach out and talk to us, and we'll tell you exactly what that looks like. But thanks for watching today. Be excellent.